Ministers are seriously considering plans to send criminals to Estonian jails, as men's prisons in England and Wales almost ran out of space last month. Estonia is 2,000 miles from the UK. It has a low crime rate and therefore half its prisons are empty. It's also 30 to 40,000 pounds cheaper to house a prisoner there than it is here. So here it's about 50 grand a year. There it's between 10 and 20,000 pounds a year. So before I get the panel's views on this, let's put your geography to the test. Saira, where do you think Estonia is on this map? And I have sprung this on you, I know.
I definitely know it's sort of near Denmark, Sweden, around that kind of area.
It's over there towards Russia. I can see it's there.
Can you see it? I mean, I'll show you where it is. So it's basically just under Finland. That's Finland there.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
And Estonia is just under there, below Finland. So just down
no,
there
above
Finland.
Poland, yeah.
Yeah. So that's where Estonia is. And the question is, Owen, does it make financial sense? Does it also make quite sort of logical sense? You know, our prisons are full and therefore you're signalling to people who want to commit criminal activity, go ahead and do it because we can't bang you up. There's no space in our prisons. Keir Starmer's been very loud and clear about that. So if we say, well, actually, do you know something? For the price of a cheap air ticket, we can get you into a jail in Estonia and it won't cost us very much. In fact, it'll be a colossal saving. Isn't that a good idea?
I think it's absolutely preposterous.
Why?
Because you're right, we've got the third biggest prison population in Europe. And do you know what the top two are? Russia and Turkey. Not, I would say, striking examples of democracies. We lock too many people up because we deal with symptoms rather than causes. Look, a lot of people we're locking up are basically people with often very bad mental health who've been traumatised. Most people who are locked up, for example, have depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. They're often people who've disproportionately suffered abuse in childhood. And if we compare with Norway, where they focus on rehabilitation rather than just lock them up, throw away the key, their reoffending rate after a year is 20%, ours is 50%. Just so you know, I walk the walk here. And I don't often talk about this because, you know, I don't want to center this on my own experiences. But look, I was beaten up by a neo-Nazi in 2019 on my birthday. And that he was, when I say neo-Nazi, I'm not being flippant. He had a house full of Nazi material, SS flags, Nazi death heads. He took it seriously. Anyway, he beat me up along with two of his accomplices and he was convicted and he was sent to prison for 2 years and 8 months. But I put on my victim impact statement that I did not want him to go to prison.
Why not?
Because he had 8 previous convictions. He'd gone in and out. And I don't think, in his case, being a violent far-right extremist, that he was going to be cured of that. He'll just go in the justice system and then come out again.
Yes, but Saira,
I want something to change.
But you could say for those 2 years that he was in prison, he wasn't going to do what he did to you to anybody else. And part of the point of prison is to protect the rest of us from people who might in some way hurt us or prey upon us.
We need people who cannot look after themselves and who are a danger to society to be off our streets. We do. If people, you know, and we need punishment for people who've committed crimes like murder and violence against women and all that kind of thing. I have seen there are a lot of wrong uns out there, and I've seen that rehabilitation does not work.
Right, let's bring in this practical solution.
Yes,
Estonia isn't far away. It would be cheap to get people there, and it would be cheap to keep them there, much cheaper than prison. So do you think it is a viable idea to export prisoners if our prisons are full here?
We have got to start finding solutions to the fact that we do not have capacity in our country. So what are you going to do? You are going to have to ship and find places elsewhere.
Okay,
you're going to have to find solutions, and that could be one solution.
Let's ask a specific question. Take female prisoners. Most women in prison are survivors of domestic abuse.
I don't know the facts about stuff like that.
Are we going to send women who've been locked up, overwhelmingly not for violent offences, I might add? Or are we going to send people who've been beaten up by their partners and have ended up, for whatever reason, in prison? Are we going to deport them to Estonia, to a prison there? What are we thinking here?
I think
we're a minute.
I think we're looking at specific,
because this is very emotive language.
Yes.
Deport them. They're not being deported.
They are.
They're not, because
they're
not going to be housed
for the duration
of
their prison sentence. They would be in prison in Estonia, and when their prison sentence is over, and we know that Keir Starmer announced pretty much soon after becoming Prime Minister that lots of prisoners will now serve only 40% of their sentence. sentence, not 50. So when the sentence is over, they come straight back.
Well,
Nobody's
can I
saying
say why it's
they're
such a,
deported.
Can I say
they're
why,
not deported.
Well, they are literally being deported out of the country, but
They're literally not. They're literally being imprisoned in
elsewhere.
Estonia.
We're having a
afterwards.
semantic kind of argument here. They're getting taken out of their country in a plane and sent somewhere else.
What's wrong with that?
Because one of the main problems with prison is what it does is it takes people out of their family networks. In terms of being able to engage in society.
Owen, sometimes they have to because it's for the safety of the family.
Let me explain. You take people and you put them into prison with other people who they mix with, often, by the way, not for serious offences, where you take them and put them in a school for crime, where people end up not being employable afterwards, not having family networks and friendship networks. They come out of prison often in a far worse state than they came in because those networks have been disrupted. I want people to be integrated in society. I want them to get jobs.
Why
and
don't
work.
we take out
Send
of
them to
the,
Estonia. You can't
let's
do
take
that.
out of the
Offer that in
equation
prison.
whether prison works or not.
No, but I'm saying
but
Estonia
let's
makes that
take
work.
that out of the equation. So these are people who have been given a custodial sentence. Let's just assume that's for a good reason. Judges aren't imbeciles. They know what they're doing. Custodial sentences are fairly rare. So this is somebody given a custodial sentence. We know that that places in British prisons are at a premium. We're running out of places. We know that, running out of cell space. And we know that when the riots occurred and the Prime Minister wanted to show quick, speedy and effective justice, the question was, my God, where are we going to put these people who are being sentenced to jail time? Because we haven't got places in our jails. So if you take out of the equation whether you believe in prison or not, wait a second, because this is a fait accompli. These are people going to prison, whether you like it or not. So if they are, is the Estonian solution pretty good because it's so economical, cheaper, and convenient,
it's
not far away?
It's more expensive because if you want to? The question people ask is: do you think we should reintegrate people in society who have broken the law and have ended up in a very problematic situation where they've harmed other people and themselves?
You're not answering the question.
No, I am. I'm saying if it's about reintegrating people into British society, sending people to another country,
you're not
is the
reintegrating
worst
somebody
thing you can
while
do.
they're in prison.
Yes, you are.
Of course you're not.
Yes, you
they're
are.
in prison. What
They're in
difference does it make
prison.
where they physically
because
are?
you get
Let's bring in our caller. Dave's on the line in Lancaster. Dave, they're getting very cross here about this. How do you feel the idea that Estonian prisons are much cheaper and half empty? Does it make sense to you? 20 grand a year max rather than 50 grand a year here?
Well, I've never heard. I'm listening to all of you. For once in my life, I agree with Owen. And the lady at the end of the bench in the green, I don't know her name.
Saira.
Well, I've heard some twaddle in my time, but she's quite happy for us to have criminals. She's not bothered that we've got criminals. She just wants to put them somewhere out of the way so as they don't bother her.
I'm not saying I'm happy about it. I'm saying we've got
We've
them.
got criminals.
Well, what's your answer, Dave, to that question? It's a huge question. When you say she's not asking why do we?
We have to do something with society. It's society that's wrong. People don't get a fair crack of the whip, so they turn to crime. If you can't earn enough money to look after yourself, you're going to turn to crime.
Dave, isn't that ridiculous? Insulting, though, to all the people who are on very low wages and live a decent, honest, upright life. It isn't a given that if you're on a low income or if you're unemployed, you'll turn to crime. Lots of people wouldn't dream of it, Dave, surely.
No, they wouldn't. They'll just suffer and put up with it. And there are other people that won't do that and will turn to crime.
What's a lot of twaddle?
All you're doing is moving a problem. It's the same as Rwanda. Rwanda won't solve the problem. It'll just move the problem.
Exactly. And also,
people in prisons doesn't solve the problem. It just moves the problem.
It imposes another punishment because it, in practice, stops family visits, doesn't it? You won't be able to have that connection. That, I think, is something which will have a severe emotional impact on people and make, I think, the problem often much worse, not least if they're people with very bad mental health. I don't think people are thinking about the consequences.
It may even prevent people who may be thinking of doing a crime actually not doing it because they're thinking, oh, my goodness, I might have to go away. I might have to be taken away.
As you can see, feelings running very high on this one. Dave, thank you very much. After the break, I'm glad to say we're going to be taking more of your calls on this. Does it make sense to you to send prisoners, people who should be in prison in this country, to Estonia, where their prisons are cheap and half empty? 0207. But now your calls on whether we should send criminals to Estonia to tackle prison overcrowding. Let's start with Julie in Essex, who knows a great deal about this kind of thing. Julie, glad you called. Hello.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning. I would like to put input. I've worked several years within the prison system.
Yeah.
I have a son who currently is a prison officer. I fear for him. The whole place is so dangerous. Several years ago, they decided not to build more prisons. They haven't invested in them for a lot of time. They need to send people, give time, re-educate staff, recruit staff and build prisons.
Tell me, though, if, as a temporary fix, exporting prisoners to Estonia, because it's good value for money, not too far away.
Totally.
You think it's a good idea, do you?
Totally, yes, totally. Relieve the prisons at the moment, give them chance to employ staff. It's a long process to join the prison system, so we need the space.
Can I ask, are the prison staff all going to be Estonian? Can we just talk about the practicalities of this? How either we're going to export a load of people who are going to be English prison staff or British prison staff, or you're going to have a load of prison staff who don't often speak English at all.
I mean, you're the
How is that
just,
even
excuse me,
gonna work?
Owen, you just said that you're going to have an interpreter at your own wedding.
Exactly.
You just get an interpreter. It's
Are
not
you
that
kidding?
difficult, is
Okay,
it?
so we're going to hire an army of interpreters as where every prison officer has their own interpreter. This is so unbelievably
But
practical.
Owen, you can't answer the question because you're diverting it into lots of different subsectors.
I'm just saying, talk about the practicalities.
The question is this. In this country, the prison service is on its knees.
Right.
OK, there is no space, but we need to make space. So what do? Do you build more and more in this country?
You stop locking people up
do
for
you
should
Why
stop
don't we ask
question.
Julie about that? Because as she says,
question.
her son's a prison officer. She's worked in the prison system for years. Julie, you hear Owen there saying there are simply too many people locked up. They shouldn't be locked up. Do you think that's true?
Yes, there is cases that shouldn't be in prison. I totally agree. But there's also, and this is going to be quite detrimental, people are using the mental health system. They're abusing it. There are so many sad cases that have mental health.
That's what I mean.
But there
That's
is
the problem.
Pardon?
Yeah, that's the issue. So we lock up so many people with bad mental health who've often
But there's
suffered childhood
also
trauma.
people using that mental health system, abusing the mental health
In what way? So I don't. But how are they abusing it?
Right. In prison, they're very corrupt. They're manipulators. If Joe next door is getting everything because he has a mental health issue, you can guarantee Tom next door is also now going to claim that because he now has mental health.
But we do have, based on the diagnoses of mental health, and they're experts, because they understand people who are trying to put it on and people who don't. That's why they're experts. I just think, for me, if we're talking about, basically now, what we're talking about is dumping often a lot of people with very complex needs into a country where they won't even be able to communicate with the prison staff. How are you going to reintegrate people into society?
They've also got standard of English spoken in Estonia for a start. Julie, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Lindsay, who's in Greater Manchester. Hello, Lindsay. What do you think of the idea of using Estonian prisons, which are half empty, to accommodate our prisoners?
Hi, good morning. I don't think it's the best idea.
Why?
I work in tenancy support in housing in Manchester. I also deliver training on trauma and adverse childhood experiences. You will find that a lot of people that are in prison have never dealt with things from the past, which have made them have poor choices in life. Nobody wakes up a criminal. Nobody's born a criminal. Nobody's born a drug addict or alcoholic. Something happens in life, and these things materialise. I run a service for people that have hoarding disorder and behaviour. It's exactly the same there. My son's a probation officer. He says to me, "Mum, I see the same people coming through the door all the time." I said, "That is because you are treating the symptom, not the cause."
In my primary school,
goes to prison.
I'm from Greater Manchester. I'm from Stockport, South Manchester, obviously. But I went
South Manchester's.
Oh well, I could tell. I could hear the South Man note there.
It's a bit of a Bolton accent.
I went to Carroll Green Primary School, and I was the only. Sorry, more boys in my class ended up going to prison and university. And when I say that, I was the only boy to go to university. And I could see, if I think about the boys who ended up in prison, these were people with frankly, very difficult and often traumatic childhoods where they didn't have love and support. One of them was in care. And I remember they would occasionally, you'd have these episodes where chairs would be flowing around and then teaching would stop for a moment. But what I mean is, I had a very different I saw the contrast from my background and the people I grew up with. And I know people, you say, well, just because you're in poverty doesn't mean you go out and break the law. And that's true, of course that's true. But there's lots of people who suffer trauma and they don't have the same...
But I wonder, I'm going to ask Lindsay this because she's obviously an expert in this field. Lindsay, I wonder if we've got two different questions here. One is, why do people reoffend? Why do they turn to crime in the first place? What's going wrong in society and family building and care and all those sorts of things? Huge issue, which needs a great deal of resource and imagination and God knows what to look into. But the other issue is the practical one. If people have been sentenced to a term in jail and there's no space in our jails here, what do we do with them? The much more practical, immediate concern. Both the huge issues, both need to be dealt with. And thank you so much for the call. Let's go to James in Shropshire on this one. Hi, James.
Yeah, hi, Vanessa. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. What do you think about this? Estonian jails.
Let me just say this first. A great idea by Keir Starmer. I don't like Keir Starmer, but it's probably the best idea he's ever had. And, before I came on your show, before Owen spoke this morning, I knew he's Mr. Predictability. You know exactly what he's going to do and what he's going to say before he says it.
Well,
now, listen,
I mean, I've got values and principles which I stick to. No. I'm not ashamed of that, James.
I grew up in Moss Side, which is a much tougher place than Stockport was. Now, the problem we have...
Competition.
The problem we've had with prisons in the past number of years is that they're too soft. I've said this before on one of your programmes. I went to Shrewsbury Prison, which closed about 20 years ago. Reoffending in Shrewsbury Prison was nil because it was tough. They built the prison 10 miles from Shrewsbury Prison in Wrexham, and it's a holiday camp. People are in and out of there every single day. And this mental health, I've suffered with mental health most of my life. They keep bringing this up, and it's so damned annoying. This idea about sending people to Estonia, I think it's one of the best ideas I've heard.
You say about predictability. So you said I've got predictable views, and I have to say, I don't want to be harsh, but you've got some of the most cliched views I've ever heard. A holiday camp. Well, I know you read the Daily Mail. I know you read the Daily Mail a lot, and I know you think it's Butlins, and they're all having a great time. Prison is a terrible place. Prison is a place where...
Owen, don't shout down the caller because he says he doesn't at all think that.
What you're going to say, Owen, before you say it.
You can say the same about you, James.
I was one of 7 kids brought up in Manchester in Moss Side. I didn't have the kind of luxury that you had in Stockport. Okay,
this is hilarious. Okay,
you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the Monty Python sketch about, for Christmas dinner we used to have one suck on our dad's shoelaces, so we don't want to descend into who had a more.
But the background,
I'll tell you what, feelings are running so high on this, James. I'm going to thank you very much.
Enjoy the grudge you're nursing there, James.
Thank you, James. Lots of people extremely keen to talk about this issue. I'm not at all surprised. So we're going to be taking a few more calls on this after the break. And we're returning to your calls, there have been so many of them, on whether criminals should be sent to Estonia to be in their prisons to tackle our overcrowded prison problem over here. Let's start with Tony in Carmarthenshire. Hi, Tony.
How's it going, man?
It's going all right. How's it going with you?
All right, not too bad at all, man. I just want to say, I grew up in the prison system since I was about 15 years old, man. Not proud of it, it's long past now, but what I'm saying is back in the day, it was a long time ago. But, it was easy, man. I went back, I kept going back, man. But, don't get me wrong, when I first went in, I cried my eyes out, man. But now, you look at the system now, man. I mean, you got televisions in the cells and everything, man. Right? Radios, televisions, phones, you even got a phone, right? Back in the day, and none of that stuff, man. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is now you got too many people in the systems, and they're all going all over the place, right? So if you got people from, let's say you got 1,000 from Africa, man, right? Send them back to the prison cells over there in their own country,
OK, but what about sending our prisoners to Estonia? That's the question. If we've run out of space here, is it a good idea or not?
So, I don't know about that. So how are people going to go and visit their loved ones? I'm saying to make it as a deterrent for people coming over here and committing crimes, just put them back in their own country and the prisons over there.
Appreciate the call and thank you very much indeed. Let's talk to Andrew, who's on the line in London. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, good morning. I know we have short time, so I'll try and be as brief as I can. But I was calling because I think the answer is no. We shouldn't be sending them to
Okay, why not?
Estonia. I think we should be building new prisons here, and obviously this is a money situation. The government doesn't have any, but I think this is one place where privatisation could come in, and if we built prisons on a whole new structure that would solve the problem of taking people off the streets because they are criminals, but not locking them up and throwing away the key. It would be done, built prisons on a whole new structure. You go in on a basic cell, no phone, like the last caller was saying, no TV, etc. And then you start your rehabilitation from the very beginning. There are wings of the prison that you can learn trades. There's tech. I heard on this show before where they said that they just went in and played video games. Well, you got to earn your right, and then you go up.
And also incredibly expensive, and also it's going to take forever, even with the most ardent privately run company getting the contract to build a prison of this nature, incredibly expensive, and in the long term it's going to take ages to be finished. So what do you do now that the prisons are overcrowded, now that we keep hearing we might send people home after serving just 40% of their sentence, their jail time? What would you do right now? Because you can't build a prison in a week or so, can you?
You can't build a prison in a week or so, but I think the problem is that we've been dealing with what's right now for too long, and the government, it would be in their best interest to cut the red tape and start the building next week.
But Andrew, you just said, by the way, we already have that, because you said, for example, if you want to play video games, you have to earn that. But when people talk about TVs and stuff in prison, those are privileges you earn, and they're taken away based on bad behaviour. All I say is, if we're going to send them anywhere, send them to Norway. Their reoffending rate is 20%, ours is 50%, and they focus on rehabilitation and shorter sentences and not just throwing away the key.
See, I thought it was the principle of sending them out of the country that you objected to. I didn't think you were going to suggest Norway as a more attractive alternative.
I'm saying it's absolutely ludicrous to send people out of the country, but if I'm having to play ball, let's send them to Norway.
All right, thank you.